You know, he's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Welcome back to the Getting Lit podcast. Last episode, well, the last 3 episodes, we did our Dostoevsky's Demons series, which was a lot of fun. That's only on Patreon, so go and check that out if you haven't already. This episode, we are talking to Andy Edwards, who is the author of Crowbar and King of Dogs. But for this episode, we'll be looking at the new book, which is Crowbar. And Crowbar is a very interesting book, and it's great to have Andy on to talk about it because there's so much in it. It's quite a short book, but it's very, I find it very sort of like dense and textured. So I think there's a lot of stuff that we can discuss. But Andy, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
No worries. Like, it's a pleasure to have you. I always ask this when we have, authors with new books out. What would you say is the elevator pitch for Crowbar? So sorry to be like Mr. Hollywood here, but
It's fine. I should be practicing these sorts of things. There's like a last line on the back of the book where it's something like, because this is what Hollywood usually does, right? They'll say it's Beverly Hills Cop plus
meets
Little
Frankenstein.
Mermaid, Frankenstein, whatever. So I look at this as sort of like James Ellroy plus David Lynch moving towards Dostoevsky. Not that I'm not placing myself in this rarefied air, but I mean, those are the influences, and I think that's a pretty decent way to try and summarize it.
Okay. With Dostoevsky, we've just done a series, as I said at the top, about Dostoevsky. It might not be out by the time, this comes out. So, we haven't recorded the last episode. But what would you say is the influence of Dostoevsky in this? I'm interested in that. Like, obviously, I can see the Lynchian, like the surreal elements. The Ellroy sort of informs the style a lot, and I was going to ask you about that. But like, Dostoevsky is an interesting touchstone. What do you think's the influence there for this book?
I would say it's not really technical or related to craft, and it's definitely not really related to the subject, the plot or anything like that. I'd say it's the spiritual part. And it's dealt with obviously very differently than anything Dostoevsky did, as far as I know. But I am, more than nominally, but I'm an Orthodox Christian, and so is he. And so a lot of I think the truth is that much of the theological material it's kind of having a resurgence now. It's been buried in Greece and Russia, and I think Orthodoxy in general has kind of been buried. It is kind of on the upswing, and so I would say a lot of this has influenced my worldview in terms of the supernatural or spiritual aspects of life. But you're definitely not going to get, like a lot of discussions. Well, there are some party scenes actually, aren't there? I don't know. Maybe there's more Dostoevsky than I thought. But yeah,
and the kind of rendering of a based on what I've read. So, like, I wouldn't say I'm widely read in Dostoevsky, but the rendering of a a kind of the spiritual elements to like a socio cultural milieu, I guess, I think is maybe some of the stuff that's in there in this book. Even though this book is very pared down, there is like, there are kind of like gestures towards that a lot. Like, and sometimes it's by inference, sometimes it's by like, just directly stating some of these things. But yeah, I really liked it. It's sort of like a dark, I would say it's noir inflected, if not very much within the noir tradition. Um, and it's centered on two mercenaries, Jay and Al, who uh, is that their names?
Yeah.
Sorry, there
Yeah.
were a couple of names, so I don't know if I mixed them up or not. Um, and so where we enter like this increasingly strange, sort of dangerous worlds of crime, conspiracy, cults, and shadow power structures, which I really liked. Um, and the narrative is quite chaotic, atmospheric. I would say elusive is another word I would do. Like I would use like in terms of talking about that gesturing towards the time and stuff like that. It is set in 1982. There are references to things like MK Ultra, which I really liked. And it's sort of like the MK Ultra burnout, like the after effects of that, which I love that was sort of like a texture to this book. So I'm guessing you've read Chaos.
I've actually only skimmed it.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah,
Was
I've
it more
picked up.
like, oh, I've researched all this stuff before, so I didn't need, I've heard it all before, or
Honestly, it was, yeah. It was. I got into it, and I know all of this stuff. I have
Mm.
3 children, and I've got a book to write, so I'm going to move on. And I just really skimmed it. I downloaded it on audiobook
Mm.
and tried to I did digest a fair bit of it, but yeah, I've been with this kind of material now for close to 20 years.
Hmm.
MK Ultra, all of the various CIA, that era, COINTELPRO, Monarch, and I've always found it fascinating. I do not really identify as I'm just somebody that,
A schizo.
well, I am, but I didn't need that to really justify it, which is kind of true actually. But I just don't feel like there's much to gain in just digesting that narrative as it's been put forward. I mean, everyone thinks it's one half or a limited hangout or something like that. And so to get all worked up about it, I mean, we should be a little bit worked up about it, sure, but to conclude that I know or someone knows exactly how that went down is to me a little suspect.
Out of interest, how did you get into it initially, like looking into that stuff? Podcasts, books,
It would have been like real early internet, so I probably would have been. Where it probably comes from is uh, LSD, and because that is also clearly related. But that was an interest of mine going way back to high school, and where I live here on the West Coast is probably not unfamiliar to you guys. Northern California on up really through Portland, Oregon. A lot of that culture was sort of established in this area. And I grew up not in a real hippie milieu. My dad's an accountant. My mom's a nurse. They smoked a little weed, but like LSD was not part of our our family thing. So by the time I came of age, though, it is part of like maybe the under fabric, if you will, of this area. And so I don't know. I joke sometimes like I don't remember running into anybody who hasn't taken hallucinogens here. And it's true. Like I know there are people who have not, but it's near ubiquitous that somebody's had some experience with it. And then the oddity around it about how it comes to exist and then be proliferated in America at least. And my knowledge of how it gets like over to Australia, for example, is zero. I have no idea. I'm very local on this. But yeah, that's probably where it started because I remember reading several books about about the CIA interest in LSD, and finding it lacking, I think, in any certainty. The takeaway
Mm,
is like we're gonna do what we want, and then you guys will deal with it, which is what okay, that's what happened.
mm. One of my favorite factoids about LSD is that the German author Ernst Junger was like really into it, which seems so like
Yeah.
incongruous with his whole thing. Like, he's this sort of like aristocratic kind of conservative German who wasn't really on board with Nazism, but they kind of like they left him alone sort of thing. And then he gets into LSD, I think actually in the like later half of his life, which is
Yes.
yeah, really, really interesting. I just love that factoid. So I'm just saying it.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
I
it
do
fits in
too.
with his. I was
Yeah.
just gonna say, I think it fits in with his whole ethos or whatever. It's like, the warrior spirit. He just became like a psychedelic warrior at a certain
Mm,
part.
mm, mm,
And that can be like
I
a
think that's
battlefield.
mm.
I would agree. Yeah, and I also love that factoid. I think you're right about the I mean, that's how it was sort of presented to me. This was prior internet, so
Mm,
we had books and then we had what I guess I could call like an oral history or culture of it. And it definitely was presented at that time as like, can you handle this?
mm,
Are you ready for this sort of thing? Whereas now, it's much more therapeutic, I think, in the way that it's kind of discussed. And but Junger, that's funny that you use because he is kind of like an aristocrat. And of course, in America, we don't have aristocrats really, but nonetheless, it there too, I think, was proliferated through our aristocratic stand-in of Hollywood and
mm.
it's kind of famous folks. Cary Grant famously was Jack Nicholson, and then Ken Kesey, who's in Crowbar, of course. And yeah, that aspect of it has always been very curious to me. Like, what was it this exclusive thing? I mean, I guess it probably must have been. This is something that most people don't know about. And then by the time, it comes to be the 90s, the story has shifted like almost on the surface, it's permanently sort of labeled as destructive. But that oral culture thing that I mentioned, that was very much counter to the idea. It was much more in alignment with this therapeutic thing that's come about now. It was like a weird mixture.
Mm, mm, mm.
But of course that was 30 years ago, so
Yeah. I like that you mentioned how like the local or regional elements, how a lot of this stuff proliferated in the area, like that you know quite well. And, your descriptions of this area as well in this book are kind of sort of suffused with like this even just like, if you're just describing, like briefly a landscape or something, it feels like it's all LSD laced, like, it feels like it's just like running through the air and stuff. But it also feels, because it's in the 80s, it also feels like a kind of aftershock of all of this stuff. And I don't know if that was the vibe you were going for, but that was something that really struck me about it around the world that you're constructing here.
well, thank you. I think maybe it goes back to this idea that it is sort of infused, especially on along the coast.
Mm,
If you just march up the coast from really San Diego all the way through California, all the way up to, oh, I mean, about Oregon. I would stop at about Oregon. It doesn't it doesn't so much move inland. Our
mm.
culture here is, I mean, it's
That's because of
cowboy.
Bigfoot, I think. Bigfoot's there, so like it's like a
Yeah.
shield,
You
Bigfoot shield. Yeah.
He is more about mushrooms, I think. He doesn't want the competition, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
go ahead.
no, you go ahead. Mm.
I was just say I'm gratified to hear that there's some amount of kind of synergy between those elements. I can't say as it's intentional so much as, you know, the craft is just in some ways it's just like painting layers and trying
Mm.
to blend them together.
Yeah. So, in terms of your, I haven't read your last book, King of Dogs, but I've heard good things about it. Um, and this book is connected in some way. Am I right in that?
Yeah.
But I've heard from what I've read that it's like sort of a little bit of a departure in style wise or something like that. So like why why make that decision? Why not do the like standard, hey, I'm doing an action crime series, here's part one, here's part two.
That's a great question. And no one's asked that question yet. So it's the first book I did was called King of Dogs, and I didn't really want to hide. There's this thing about Cormac McCarthy, and there's a similar thing with Hemingway or maybe Ellroy, where the style is so distinct that if it's influenced you as a writer, I suppose you kind of have two choices. Like you can try and hide it, or you can try and accentuate what you've taken away. And I feel like at this point and maybe you guys should weigh in on this. I think you'd probably know better than I, but for for let's say masculine sorts of writing, you guys had one of my all-time favorites on your show, Mr. Mamet,
Oh yeah.
David Mamet. And this is a guy who's been a huge influence on me. I've studied all of his theoretical books. I've, seen every movie, I've read every book. So McCarthy is similar, more in terms of the prose. And I thought I would just do my best to not extract necessarily, but understand as much as I could about his prose style, and then alter it as it seemed right, to develop something like my own voice. And so there's been a lot of comparisons about that first book with McCarthy. Not everybody actually sees it, which is so maybe I sort of tucked things away well enough, but I don't try and hide that. I mean, he's the major prose kind of stylist influence, and I would say Mamet is as well. But once that was out of the way, I felt like I'd kind of processed it, and I wanted to do something different to the extent that I could. I do have a career, or I will, I thought I'm just going to do whatever I want. I'm not going to, no one's handing me $1 million to do this. I put my kids to bed. I sit down in the dark for 3 hours, and that's, a labor of love or whatever. So I'll be damned if I'm going to listen to, the audience or the critics, or to the extent that any of that even exists. So when it came to Crowbar, um, it seemed like there was less time. So I didn't, with this McCarthy stuff, I mean, it's like embroidery or whatever. I mean, you really have to take hours and hours. I would spend hours on single paragraphs for King of Dogs, and people like it, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. But I thought in order to maybe counterbalance that, I will move closer to Ellroy, who's another guy who I absolutely love. I think he's probably our greatest, in my opinion, he's my favorite living novelist, maybe the greatest. And so I thought, well, I'll hew closer to him, and then as necessary, I can always pull out more McCarthyisms, if you will. And I found as I was doing it that I really liked that. I enjoyed it. I thought, it works where it works. Maybe it won't work for everybody, but I liked it. And I sort of projecting into the future, will I do something else? Yeah, probably. it seemed enough of a shock to do the Crowbar style, which, as you pointed out, is very textured. It's super compressed. No one's going to pick that book up and get past a few pages without realizing, oh, this guy's doing something a little bit different. So
Yeah.
in the future, I hope to, or my thinking right now is maybe I will work towards blending them a little more. Um, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that you mentioned Ellroy because I really found that I could see that influence there. But the difference is that I actually am not a huge fan of Ellroy. Like I appreciate him and I love his personality. I think he's hilarious. I love how grumpy he is. Or just irascible, is probably the better word.
Yeah.
But I what I like what I appreciate about his style, and I think like I kind of liked the way you did it better, maybe because it was more compressed. So it was like, because I tried to get through LA Confidential and it just took me so long. Like I quit it multiple times because I was reading it and I was like, this should just be a monologue. Like this should be performed like because it's very oral and it's like I think so anyway. And it's
Yeah.
there's an orality to it. But one of the things that I like about it, and I think that you kind of carry it through in Crowbar, is this. It's almost like a kind of it is pared down and as you say, but it's like that kind of staccato rhythm as well. But it's also something about it, like a kind of paranoia is weaved into it, in the
Yeah.
sense of like. I wish I found an example from, either Elroy's book or yours, but like a character will just be, in a scene doing something and then will suddenly switch to something else they've seen or noticed or thought about or whatever. And that can sometimes just be one word. It can be two words. And it's just like folded into the paragraph. And I like that because it has this sort of like hyper vigilant like paranoia to it, which like that's part of the textual elements, I think. And I don't know, I think maybe because of the subject matter, like I kind of appreciated it more in your book than Elroy's, but like, so
Well, thank you so much. I'm really, again, gratified to hear that because those are conscious choices. And I'm, I'm assuming exactly that will happen, that the textural, almost like a hyperlink, within a sort of a pastiche where you see red and then you see red again, or you see the word LSD or the word LSD, which at that level, like for me, that was a big departure, like a risk in my
mm,
mind. I hadn't seen many people do it. Um, and I definitely agree, with the idea that some of Elroy's stuff, I mean, that's why I chose to do it the way I did it, because I knew this book was going to be just by like the material itself was going to be uncomfortable and a lot of people would recoil. But at the same time, how else do you present that other than in this, for me anyway, this fractured kind of atomized sense? So it was a bit of a balance to present the plot or and use the style along the way.
mm,
Uh, and so the one thing I did lift very consciously from Elroy, he has, as you say, the staccato thing that he does, where he'll say, um, you know, John, John, washed the dishes. John opened the microwave. He'll John went to the bathroom. It's like John, 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 and we're like, McCarthy would never do that. Hemingway would never do that. We all know who you're talking about in this paragraph. But by doing it, it has an effect, like a sort of like a textural effect for sure, which is always really important, I think, because we're not writing for children here. We're writing for intelligent grown men usually who understand that they're reading a book, and so you're engaged with it at that level. And so I tried to use it somewhat sparingly where I could.
Mm,
But to like get into description with that and like move the plot forward with that style would seem to me a step too far.
mm. Yeah, like I did want to get your thoughts on like how you went to bed, like how in terms of the writing process, like how long did this take you? Like, and was there like a redrafting process? Like, because I've heard you in other interviews say that you wanted to approach this, like condense this down a lot, like to sort of like distill it basically. So was that just a process of, you know, do you know, editing as you go or whatever? Was it more instinctual, or were there like 1,000 drafts?
There were, I think, 12, somewhere between 12 and 15 drafts.
Hmm.
What I tend to do is uh, is work a whole draft and then start at the go back to the beginning. And I like to take a little bit of a rest to think about it. Usually I know along the way and I'm making notes and I will
Hmm.
develop a kind of file. Usually it's a bit on my phone, a bit on the computer, and then some handwritten. So I will sort of compile that all together and then I just think of it as the power document or the juice document, and it's all of these little elements that oftentimes they're just details. Other times they're more substantive, and so I depend on that process to kind of not lose too many ideas.
Hmm.
And I forgot the first part. The way that you opened that question was I was going to say something about it, but
The writing process of and how like you wanted to condense it down and
oh yeah.
yeah.
So thank you. I had this number, which is somewhat random, I suppose, 55,000 words, but 50,000 is usually the cutoff for, by somebody's standard, I guess, a novella. And so I thought, well, I'll go to 55 to just make it like the bare ass minimum of what a novel can be. And so that it seems arbitrary, right? And I know that there's enough little ifs and ands and buts that I could have gone back maybe and actually trimmed it to that exact number. By the end, I was pretty happy. It came in at 56,000.
Hmm.
And so the first draft, though, was so close to 55 that I felt like maybe I had pulled off a magic trick or maybe I had deluded myself and I'd missed something. So it took a few more, well, I guess 11 or 12 more drafts to kind of be okay with it. And in terms of the origins, I had big pieces of what I think of as like the subsurface material, which we can talk about if you want, going way, way back into like 2017. And I
Hmm.
just sort of stowed it away and thought about it and talked about it and tried to approach it from as many angles as I could to understand what it was that was kind of being churned up in there. And then I started to amass characters and plot and situation around that. And then last year I just sat down. So it was about a year ago now that I put out the first draft. And it was
Hmm.
all last year. But I do feel that in terms of process, maybe this will help some other writers. That's a true thing. And to the extent that you can kind of figure out what works for you, it's pretty useful once I figured out for myself that I like to sort of incubate or stew on this stuff for quite a long time, and then when I'm ready, I just want to do it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
The writing.
even the just like just really kind of basic things that I like sort of picked up on, like you were saying, ifs and buts and stuff, you were cutting a few of those, or you could have cut more or whatever. I liked that, like I think I can count on one hand the amount of sentences that begin with the. Like it's that there's that little element to it, like you're taking out those sort of like, I wouldn't say superfluous, but like, articles and things like that, that I don't know, like something about that um helps give you the kind of vibe. I keep saying vibe, and I think it's a overused term, but like the sense of the novel, right? Like that helps because it makes you feel sort of unmoored, like this world kind of is by not like sticking to that sort of standard, the cat sat on the mat kind of structure of sentences. Like so, you'll be describing something, and it won't be like I don't know. It'll be like adjectives and nouns, and that's about it sometimes, and that gives you the sense of it without like um I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like it's giving you
It's like,
yeah, sorry, go.
yeah, the way I kind of think about it is sort of like, to go with the title of the book, like the LSD and everything's like taken a crowbar to reality and kind of like unmoored it a bit. And the way the language is used gives it that kind of like untethered, postmodern, just like free flowing sort of state, something
Mm,
like that.
yeah. You put it better than I did.
Well, you set me up. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, no. So that's like I really appreciate when style meets the kind of, I guess for want of a better word, thematics of a story. So, and obviously you do too, Andy.
Yes, I do. I mean, you know what? If I could go back and answer that first question about, the first novel, King of Dogs, that's probably a better way to think about it is the the thematic elements of King of Dogs, they just it's as if it's almost I think of it almost like an instrument. Like I want to grab the oboe here. And not everybody can play the oboe. A lot of people can play guitar, but not everybody can play the violin. But the for that story, Crowbar, it felt like this is the style that serves that material best. And when I was thinking again about, well, is there a career? Like, do we even have careers as novelists anymore? Is that I realized even if we do, and I'm not so sure that we do, I'm happy enough living with, this material that was mine that I put out here with that thinking. Like, I think of it again, I see all your albums, Matt, and I actually think of them more like albums.
Mm,
Like we allow a musician to completely like switch. I'm hard pressed for a great example right now, but we could think of many of them where they do an acoustic album or they do a hard rock album and then they do a country album. I mean, Dylan has kind of done this, he's touched,
Yeah.
there's no like, I guess if we say, well, what is Dylan? I don't know, I guess it's folky. Well, dude, he hasn't done like
Yeah.
real folky stuff in like 30 years.
Dylan
I mean,
Dylan should do hyperpop next. That's what he should do.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's like, it's always sort of rooted in folk music, but he's such a master. He could make a hard rock album and it would still be a folk album sort of thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's just you wouldn't call it like it wouldn't satisfy the purists in being like, acoustic sort of whatever, but it means like, like the whole Dylan Goes Electric scandal and you're just like it's the same guy though. Like it's like, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, this is kind of a tangent, but Time
We
Out of
embrace
Mind.
those.
Okay, great. I mean, maybe my all-time favorite album is Time Out of Mind, and I think it's like track 10, Cold Iron's Bound. That's pretty close to hard rock, in many ways. And it absolutely kills. I mean, it's just an amazing song. But yeah, I mean, that's how I think of Crowbar in relationship to King of Dogs. And yeah, I'm open to doing like a country album next if that's what happens.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that idea.
Yeah.
And like it's surely yeah, I don't know if anyone's like sort of come up with that idea before, but I'm surprised that like it's the first time I've heard it because that is a great way of thinking about it, like here's my EP. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like and Also, I always think that authors should be more like musicians because authors still have this, obviously you don't, Andy, but like still have this thing about like do it yourself. Like making your own shit and getting it out there. And whereas a lot of authors, I think, have this, I don't know, uh, they think they're too good for that or something. Whereas musicians don't. Like lots of musicians just, put stuff out there, like, and it's not a big deal. And you don't have to be on a massive record label to be a working musician or whatever. And it's the same thing goes for writers, I think. And as far as like you were saying about the novel, I think like probably, yeah, that way is the way to go, to think about it as like you're a you're like you're like a SoundCloud rapper, and then you like rise up through the ranks or whatever if you want, or maybe not, or maybe you just do your thing and you get your audience and that's that. Like I think a lot of people, it's interesting this is set in sort of like the late-ish 20th century because I think a lot of ideas around the writing career are just sort of like remnants or echoes of a very specific time in the 20th century about like when writers had careers. And that was largely, I've got a whole theory about this. Maybe I'll write a chaos-like book. That was largely, I think, connected to Hollywood because like writers like at that time, because 20th century was the century of cinema, and writers I think could get careers by getting their books made into films, like, and that was like a real big deal. So I feel like that's got something to do with it. But yeah, I feel, yeah, we're kind of, I think JDO has spoken about this from Agitator, that we're moving into like a period of the artisan novelist or writer, which I really kind of like that. I think that's the way to go. Rather than chasing these 20th century, like, New York Times, I'm going to be in the New York Times and then have like $1 million advance book deal or whatever. It's not going to happen.
It's been tired for so long. I
Yeah.
mean, realistically, since I came of age, again, like 30 years ago, it would have been like David Foster Wallace
Mm.
kind of on the scene at that time. And he was pointing I think, a similar thing out and saying, nobody quite knows like how to do this anymore and I think you have to be onto something there with the connection with Hollywood and the efforts, um the the big combines that came around to grab up, and at once there was 500 publishing companies and all of a sudden there's 50. um it doesn't it has to be related to that, and it's like they keep selling it, and so tons of people probably still buy that image. I agree 100%. Obviously, like, it's a dead end, and like I say, other than, I actually don't read that much. Like, we call it Big Five. Maybe you guys do too. Like, it's just New York Times stuff. Most of it is just honestly not that good. It's just, in some ways, like in many cases, actually, it's bad.
Mm.
And I think maybe we are coming to some. I hear, you would ever since the internet came around, you're like, maybe we're going to do this, maybe we're going to do that. Well, 20 years later, there's still that huge group of people that want New York Times. They have to have this, and there's still maybe a growing but still small group of people that say, whatever, let's do it with Bitcoin, or let's just make it all. And I have to imagine eventually we'll get somewhere with it, but it's pretty tired, that old model. Maybe you guys disagree. What do you probably read more than I do too. So does it seem like a lot of really powerful, interesting stuff comes out from the big five?
I don't
No.
think so.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I don't really pay much attention to it, and
Yeah.
like it's more like I'll see, like, you walk into the big bookstore and there'll be like the wall with all the new releases, and I kind of like briefly scan it to see what's going on, but it's like it has to be like, yeah, like I have to hear like people on Agitator talk about the book to be like, okay, maybe I will check it out, but otherwise I just assume that it's probably like not going to be worth my time.
Mm. Mm.
And I think we've been right so many, or so
Yeah.
disappointed so many times that it's like, I'm good, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a this actually was a recent, I mean it's a perennial discussion, but it was a recent discussion with that guy Jacob Savage who released that piece about like, white millennial guys being kind of like shunted out of all of these creative industries. Um
Yeah.
and publishing is one of those. Um but there's something about that I like. I mean, I get it, like, because it's all true. Like, I don't deny any of the facts, but there's something about these narratives that like float around where, and I think you were talking about this, Andy, as well. Like people who still kind of are holding on to that model. So, like, I feel like a lot of these pieces come from a like sense of, oh, we just need to make them aware so they let us back in, sort of thing. And I'm just
That
like,
is, yeah.
it's not going to happen.
Mm.
Like, so you got to go and like forge your own path, sort of thing. And I think that's the way to go. Like, instead of bitching and moaning and like trying to desperately like get back to that old model or whatever.
I would agree. It's undeniable. There's always this air of let us back in.
Mm,
And that the real message is probably like, why do you want to go back in?
mm,
And if you really need them that bad, I mean, they're just going to hold that control over you forever.
mm,
I don't, yeah, but it's a strange little thing, isn't it? It's as if every article, and I've read hundreds of them over years, and there is this sense like, let us back in. Well, no, go take it or make your own thing.
mm, mm. So why? So you've always made your own thing. So how many books have you published so far? Just the two? Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was never did you consider going the big five route or like maybe an indie publisher or?
Oh, I did. I mean,
Mm.
it's been a painful process, of coming to realize that because at first, you don't know. You don't
Mm.
know how, like, am I any good? Is this any good? And then, of course, well, what makes something good? And you actually in your discussion with David Mamet, it sounded like he had a similar, maybe less dramatic, or maybe he's just far like mentally tougher than most of us, which is also possible. He seemed to have some realization about his playwriting where people were attempting to sort of describe it but he already knew where he was coming from, how he had managed his thing, and he had no certainty, but in it seemed that as if he was saying that in seeing the response, he realized, well, they don't even know what they're talking about. They're just making this up. And he just, I think, probably, figuratively speaking, just loaded up the truck and just went. And then, Pulitzer Prize, one of the best directors and, screenwriters of all time, in my opinion. And I think the whole time, part of his secret was he knew in his heart that the critics, or some of those critics, of course, they know what they're talking about. And some of those novelists or other screenwriters are brilliant, but in large measure, maybe it's just that money element that's constantly manipulating it. But he was so strong in his conviction. It seems to me that he almost like combined those two. What's maybe not a true distinction between the do-it-yourself he was talking about, and I've heard him discuss this elsewhere, the creation of his own, I think they call it a playhouse or a studio. He would just like, we're just going to do this ourselves.
Mm.
Um, and he never, as far as I can tell, like he just had a ton of mainstream success, but never let go of whatever his sort of orienting principles were.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
Mamet doesn't seem like the kind of guy who waits for permission.
no,
Like
no,
like so he just does it. Like, and I think that's what you should do. Like you should be more like that if you're, creatively inclined or like just if you want to make something in any way. It is interesting that you bring up the question of like you write something, you complete a project or whatever, and then you ask yourself, is this good? Thinking, which is like that's a good like self-critical thing to have, but it's also like not even the question of the big five mainstream anymore. Like, I don't think that they actually do vet for good. Like, there are so
Yeah, it
many
doesn't
other
look like it.
things. There are so many other things that they're like, is this person the right identity? Does this story contain X, Y, and Z? Like, like it's nothing to do with is it good?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah, yeah,
I don't think these
that's
people
a
can recognize good. So yeah.
you're right.
Mm.
Brilliant point. I'm glad you said it because here we are. I think the people who really care about these things, whether it's Bob Dylan's old catalog or uh, David Mamet's old catalog for that matter, I think you're right, man. I don't think those people ever cared, and they always had a kind of a shifting criteria of what they would back with the money, and occasionally maybe the good, aligned with their vision, or and maybe just less and less it does now. But yeah, brilliant point. I heard the other day, and I think this is true, is that actors and actresses are now a critical element in them getting hired is the number of followers they have on Instagram or whatever your social of choice is. What does that have to do with being good as an actor?
Mm. That's the same
Maybe.
with authors. Like, you wouldn't be like
Yeah.
on literary agent websites when you apply and stuff. They're like, how many followers do you have?
What's
Like,
interesting is like the days now where like everyone's talking about how like books and movies and music and all that like don't make as much money as they used to, but it seems like the way they decide if they produce it is totally down to like marketing like categories and all of that, like trying to make the money. Maybe that's just it, is they're just trying desperately to make money that they used to make, but well, back in the day it was just easier because they just get behind a good thing and then it sells millions. And it's all, it's obviously to do with like the internet and piracy and different forms way people consume things. But yeah, it just like seems like they're just way more like focused on the marketing numbers, but like are making less money.
Right. They're losing and they still don't know what the well, where to go with it.
mm, mm.
I think you're right.
I'm glad you brought up the internet, Fresta, because I wanted to talk about the internet and its role in this book. So this book is set in 1982. So I think in 1982 we've got like what's it, ARPANET and things like that, right? Like they're
Yeah.
developing the kernel of what will become the internet. I wouldn't like it's kind of integral to the book. Like it's like a main sort of thematic to it, like the internet and like it's to do with like it's obviously starts as a is it a military program or at least military funded, isn't it? Like and
It is, yeah.
they link the universities or something like that. Then that's how the internet started. My history on this is fuzzy, but yeah, like so I'm guessing this was like intentional and you weren't just spurging out on the origins of the internet and just threw it in. So what do you think we're trying to say there? Like, because I think there was something there in terms of the internet identity, some of these things we're like talking about in terms of marketing, but like in a general sort of cultural sense. Hi there, listeners. Sorry to interrupt. We really appreciate you listening to us, but if you'd like to hear more from us, you should check out our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/gettinglit and gain access to our exclusive bonus content, including Back Matter, a special after show where we chat a little bit more informally with our guests, usually about a film or something else related to the main episode. For just $5, you get access to these bonus episodes, as well as the full archive of every episode we've ever done. For more details and to get the most out of your Getting Lit podcast experience, go to patreon.com/gettinglit. Thanks for listening. Okay, back to the show.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the main it's a bit of like almost like glue
Mm,
that's that's spread around the various elements. So it's always been strange to me that the Bay Area, um, California, gives rise to the internet. It gives rise to the hippie culture. It gives rise to a lot of the music and cultural figures, I suppose, of that era. And I don't think it's. I mean, I think we know at this point that a lot of it is not coincidence. So for my whole life, I've known something about this because I have an uncle who who he went to Stanford in the, I guess, early 60s, and he went on a football, like a full ride, and he's a genius. It's something like 180 IQ. And so he did it. He had his PhD done, before I think the 4 year full ride was over, and he just stayed. Okay, so he was there for something like 25 years. They pulled him right into Stanford Research Institute, and the first microprocessing computer that was ever built, there's some contention. Other people, this is the kind of thing I guess nerds really care about. But I happen to know because it's sitting in his garage right now in Lake Oswego, Oregon, under a tarp, you know, and my uncle is like down at the grocery store just talking to people, doing whatever, because at a certain point he walked away. He was asked, I know that this story in particular kind of, if I and I'm really I'm retaining a lot of the details because people will say this isn't true. But he was asked to start Intel, and he refused, and he walked away from all of this and went back to Oregon, where my family's from, and he lived with his mom for the rest of his life. And he told me when I was in high school, a couple of things. He said that the entirety of the research that he was doing there with respect to microprocessors, the internet, all of the communications technology, it's all about war. It has nothing to do with, you and I having this conversation is kind of a cool, and they've managed to make tons of money off it otherwise, but it always was, and it will ultimately be purposed, or repurposed or applied there somehow. And I think that there's a great book that I would recommend called Human Forever by James Poulos. He's a guy I work with sometimes, and he's a friend, but it's an absolutely brilliant book. He goes into Thomas Pynchon and theology, all sorts of places to, I think, do one of the best descriptions that anyone could find right now about the situation and how, kind of back to this fracturing element and the way that Crowbars does present as almost like a soup, where is there any of this that's distinct from itself? I think that what Mr. Poulos is sort of pointing to is that this idea that this particular technology is so disruptive and so powerful that not only has it probably gotten out of our hands or the hands of some sort of evil genius that we might postulate, right? That reality itself, in some sense, whether that's just our ability to apprehend it or more, is debatable. But we've sort of passed that line in many ways, politically, socially, interpersonally, and with respect to Crowbar again, like I sort of focus on identity there, and yeah, I've always found this, like, since this was 35 years ago that my uncle told me this, and he also told me that he quit for that exact reason. So he walked away from billions of dollars and a wonderful career and all of his friends that he loved. And he's a very sane man, highly intelligent. and he didn't make this up. And of course, I still talk with him occasionally now. One of the other things that he told me was that after he quit, all of the think tanks like Lockheed, Boeing, um, Rand, I think was one of them, they would periodically, offer him a very large check to just fly down for a day and sit with them. And I was like, well, what do they want? And he said all they wanted to do was sort of pick his brain. They just kind of wanted to know, um, what are you looking at? What are your interests right now? What are you following? And usually it didn't have a lot to do with very technical things. It would have to do with culture, or it would have to do with just about anything. And as long as the check was big enough, I don't. He quit doing that at a certain point as well. But
Mm.
yeah, does this help, or does this open up any vistas in terms of answering the original question?
Well, I think it's interesting they were asking about culture, because you feel like the internet and its like interactions with culture is actually quite a late development, right? Like you feel like the mainstream sort of narrative goes that it was all about the tech and stuff and nerdish things on the internet. Then it became more popularized, and only now are we getting like we're fully unleashing the kind of cultural powers of the internet. But it's interesting that they were talking about that. Like, when was this? Like 90s, 2000s, stuff, things like that. Like,
When he first told me that, that would have been the early 90s.
interesting.
And he quit about, I don't know, maybe 5 to 7 years. So it would have been the late 80s when
Mm,
he finally said, so that, yeah, I think he spent about 25 years in total down there. And he was, yeah, that would be about right.
mm. And you know
Late
what's
80s.
interesting as well? Like, you've got all these like AI panicans talking about AI and stuff, like saying that like, oh, AI, people won't be able to tell what's reality anymore. And I'm like, that's already happened. Like,
Right.
that's what the internet has already done. Like forget about AI. Like, go back to before AI was a thing, generative AI or whatever, and go and look at like boomer Facebook, like, 5, 10 years ago. They're in completely different worlds. Like,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
like it's fractured the world, and like in that way has distorted reality. And so it's like this already exists. Like, it's kind of been there from the start. Um, Basically, when everyone got on the internet, it became sort of like that. When it was just nerds, it was kind of like, yeah, it was just not really.
It's not like you think about people from 200 years ago as having like a really like accurate vision of what reality was either. Like just newspapers and stuff like that would
Mm,
like, it's enough to distort it. So I guess the AI and all of that is just like this hyper accelerated version of it, and where they can make videos that look convincing for the
mm,
most part. I mean, usually you can sort of tell because you're just like that thing on the video seems impossible, so I'm just going to assume it's kind of like fake.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
I
what I
love
do.
I love because you get it on Facebook now. Like, I love delving into Facebook because of like the boomer slop, and you see the AI stuff. And what I find really funny is when someone it's clearly AI, like it's really, really fake looking. And then someone in the comments will be, this is fake, like just really stating the
Or like at
obvious.
Grok, is this real?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Which I appreciate that. So there's a kind of delight in this stuff as well. Like, but there is yeah, I don't know, because I don't think you can realize some of this stuff, like the crowbar to reality. Getting back to the book there, um, you can't really recognize this stuff unless you were sort of I would say conscious, or probably actually, I would go even further, be like basically almost an adult or an adolescent or an adult before this happened. Because you can just, in my lifetime, like I was actually born in 1982. So like, in my lifetime, um, the internet has basically caused the world to unhinge from my point of view. Like because I remember the before times, you know, and it never
Yeah.
used to be like this. You know, there was a sort of stability to the world, you know, and how people understood the world. Even if that was sort of like an illusion, um, it was still a stable illusion.
Mm.
Whereas the illusions are unstable now.
And like to connect some other dots, like with the LSD thing, like it is kind of like an early form of the internet where it's like creating all these connections, and the older generations would have seen it as some like destabilizing force that changed the way the world like was and the way young people acted, and there would, you know,
Mm.
something concern about it. And again, it's like, you know, they both seem like this sort of military tech that, while it has some like fun civilian applications, ultimately is kind of like a nefarious thing that's just accelerating culture wars and, you know, uprooting people from value systems and things like that. So yeah, I see that
Mm.
Yeah.
connection.
Good point.
And you know, like they talk about, you know, Zoomers and stuff and how what was I listening to recently? I think it was Glenn was talking about this on Rare Candy, that like Zoomers don't go out to bars and stuff anymore, and like they don't act stupid, and therefore they don't have as much sex as like, you know, we might have back in the day. But and don't party and stuff like that. But and the reasoning is usually because everyone's got phones. Everyone's surveilled, right, by the internet. Any kind of like attempt to be just a little bit stupid, take a little risk, you know, approach someone or whatever, could be filmed and uploaded onto the internet, and you could be humiliated. And there's this sort of sense, and even I feel this too, like there's this sense that everyone's got a phone at all times. It's all connected to the internet. Anything you do can be or will be surveilled. And like, so, whereas in the before time, I sound like such an old man, but like in the before time, like any action that you did, like you had a sort of, call it God or a conscience. That was the thing that like mediated your behavior. And
Yeah.
that's very different to the pettiness of like swarms of people online, you know? And I feel like that's a key difference that not many people like sort of pin down a lot now. Like that it's, you know, oh, we always had a kind of, you know, chorus of something sort of looking over our shoulder and like us feeling seen, but it's like seen in a different way, you know?
Well, because you think like God's gonna like understand the nuance and your
Yeah,
intention and
yeah,
everything behind it, whereas it's like it's with the surveillance thing, it's just how it's gonna look on the
yeah,
phone.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like
How
you
it's
could
going to
have,
play. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you're the only you're so I've only heard one other person ever make that a similar observation, which is terrifying.
Mm,
That because I think it's exactly right, in my opinion, that because if we replace the human conscience with something else, um, I mean, all of those implications about, well, I guess we'll have this hive mind or some sort of over morality centralized thing. Well, that's not going to happen. And of course, if it fell, what would we be left with? It's not a replacement for that internal experience. And yeah, again, there's one other guy that I've ever heard make that comment. Why is that not being repeated endlessly in New York Times? That's the whole thing. Because if we don't
mm,
have a sense of right or wrong that we can mediate on the fly, you know, with ambiguity or uncertainty or what have you in real life, what have we got? I mean,
mm.
we've just like it's no wonder these people can't go to a bar and get laid because they're probably just stuck, you know, because of course, yeah, I mean, I won't even go into it, but your point about the conscience is very well taken. It's massively important.
Mm,
And that's,
mm.
that's the mother's job. Again, back to my little kids. We talk about this at home all the time, and we shelter our kids from everything. I'll just I'll take the hit on the back end, like if I make a bunch of mistakes, but we are not approaching this whole project of launching them into this uncertain terrain, kind of half this and half that. I'm just going extreme, like no screens, no public schools. We'll just manage it on the backside,
Based.
and try and find as much, right? Like we have like our lives are just so preoccupied with having to recreate all the systems that we took for granted that were there in 1982, that my parents
Mm,
could just, drop us off, my sister and I somewhere and be not just relatively certain, but almost absolutely certain that things would go kind of as you thought. This is the this is not the time of day where people are hooking up at the bar. This is the time of day where kids are playing in the park and the park is safe and all that. And so I talk with my wife about this idea and I picked this up from my mom a long time ago, that the mother is the child's first conscience. And so I do think that you can see now efforts to, like, the female role has been displaced, right? Everyone knows this, into a sort of corporate egg brooding creature or whatever. But what nothing's going to replace that.
mm,
Nothing's going to step in and say, well, here's your little ration of bug milk or whatever and send the child on its way. And I wonder, is the idea that we just won't have children, or because without mothers, there's no children, and I think that ultimately the terrifying possibility, it's there. I don't know how true it is, but if I were to flip or to be asked, well, take a position on it, Andy, I'd say, yeah, that's where we're headed, is like straight out of the Matrix, where there's going to be some sort of way that a machine manages the procreation of human units. And
mm,
back to Mr. Poulos and his thing, Human Forever, uh, with the technology related to genetics, and it'll take a while to get there. And at some point, I think we probably need to resist very
mm,
seriously if we get the chance. But the conscience, insofar as, it's sort of instantiated, or, installed, I guess is a better
mm,
word, by the mom, um, you know, m- in many ways, the whole concept of mom is kind of at least disrupted. And you really have to go a long way if you want to be a mom in the old
mm,
sense. How sorry, but how fucking crazy is that
mm.
for a guy, who had that tether back to the old time? How do you call it?
The
The
before times.
the
Yeah, yeah.
before times. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Like, I just can't. I can't get on with any of those people that think that way. Like,
Mm,
yeah, this is important for what? I mean,
mm,
for money, for the line go up, for the machine. That whole story about the asteroids are gonna hit and we need to get off planet Earth from Elon. Like,
mm,
whatever, dude. Whatever. That's not a reason to say, let's re-architect the entire human being.
mm, mm. No. Um, and yeah, the internet's role in this as well, and like I think, like you kind of gesture towards this in the book, but this this sense of like, well, I bring up the before times as well because I actually was like an early adopter on the internet when I was younger. Because like I remember we got a new computer and it was hooked up to the internet, dial up, and but it was sort of just like a little niche hobby. Like it was just a thing that because you had to sit down at the computer to do it.
Yeah.
Like, but now and the difference now is that it's just all pervasive. Like it's everywhere.
Mm,
Like you can't, like I can't go into my gym without putting my Bluetooth on my phone on because they don't have cards anymore. I have to use a Bluetooth thing to get into it, you know? So it's like yeah, it's just everywhere rather than just like a space that you can sort of like enter into, and it's sort of threaded through everything. And I got a little bit of that sense in Crowbar, in that being almost like some of this stuff is like there's a proto element of that that's threaded through a lot of it. That pervasiveness of it, which was cool.
Thank you. As you were speaking there, I always go back to the financial incentive, which is
Hmm.
another kind of under a thread in the book, because what is the other explanation? We have to start looking at, I think, outside of ourselves and or like cycles of history
Hmm.
or spiritual impact, but it's it's disturbing now, and you're right. I think it was there, but one wonders how many people, or I mean, most of us, I guess, have gone along with it pretty much because we've had to for some financial
Mm.
or reason of convenience, which then became a financial concern.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just how it like hooks you in. But it's like, is its like goal just to accumulate money, or is there something like more nefarious going on, and it's just money is the way that it like motivates just the average person?
Mm.
And I don't know the
Yeah.
answer to that, but
Yeah. But yeah, there are like spiritual dimensions to this, and I think that that's something that you get at in the book, which is uh, it's important, and like not enough sort of writers, especially writers of this kind of genre, I guess. Like, not that it like is contained to a genre, I don't think, but like it's sort of noirish, hard-boiled, sort of actiony, like kind of, yeah, the spiritual dimensions of it are kind of just at the forefront, which I really liked. Like, so like it didn't ignore it. And I guess that going back to where we started, like that's probably the Dostoevsky influence there, I guess.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. At this point in my life, like I turned 50, I guess a couple weeks ago on Christmas Eve, and so I'm looking at the probably not even a whole half, but the backside of life. And with young children, that's just the way life worked out for me. A lot of those things I have to wade through, with some agency and not sit around and sort of hope or wonder. And that for me anyway, quick, because growing up here, again, it's kind of it's agnostic. I wouldn't call Oregon or where I come from atheist or necessarily anti spirituality, but very much agnostic. Or this, what do you hear now? It's like
Secular.
spiritual. Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of secular, but also it's not Ohio or something. Or no, Ohio's pretty religious.
Mm.
It's kind of like, well, it's not New York. New York to me would be pretty secular and like literally compartmentalized bits of religion. Here it was always just diffuse, but that wasn't enough for me. Ultimately I have embraced something more traditional, and then I've had to become, I didn't have to. I mean, it just made sense, and that was the right thing to be um more engaged with that whole piece as a thing. Like, well, our people have done this for all of history, and the idea that I'm just going to like, or that the past couple generations are going to elect not to. Okay, I suppose anybody can do whatever they want, but for me, that seems, if anything, a little arrogant, and in at least opening that door back up. Um, yeah, the benefits have been enormous in terms of coping with, because I have to cope. I
Mm.
have to cope
Mm.
now with children. It's not an option.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
You
the
got to
spiritual
cope, but
element.
you got to cope,
Sorry.
but try not to seethe. That's the that's
Right. Yeah.
um
Don't see.
so I was actually curious. You're talking about the local, the Oregon and stuff. Did you ever leave and come back?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
many
You
times.
had a
I've lived,
wander.
yeah, a big wander. I wandered and wandered and wandered for, I think I've lived in 15 other states
Wow.
for like a significant number of years, and mostly all the western states of the US. I've never, and I've driven and driven and driven hundreds of road trips. In terms of international travel, though, it's embarrassing how little I've done, which is mostly a financial thing, choices that I've made
Yeah.
along the way, which just preclude it, and then family and stuff. But yeah, people have said, I heard this the other day, that if you just travel around the United States a lot, um, you know, you, road trips or living in other places, you could give yourself a pretty decent education. And that may, to the extent that I have any education, um, I do have a degree, but I didn't really learn much. I think it did come from traveling away and then gaining some amount of perspective on where I come from, and thereby kind of realizing, I guess, who we are here in this particular Pacific Northwest. Because other people, looking, say, from the American South, they've made comments to me about what they think it's like here, and you kind of see a caricature or like a shade of truth to it, but it's like, man,
Portlandia.
right. Like
Yeah.
Portland, yeah, Portlandia is literally one street. I know the exact street because I went out 100 times that got drunk on that street. I know people who own the shops on that street. It's not even a full street. It's probably 4 to 5 blocks on one street that is really Portlandia. But everybody believes that's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
is that is interesting. No, go ahead. Sorry, finish your thought.
no,
Yeah.
you please
I
don't
was
let me
just
cut
saying
you.
that's interesting that like a lot of people I know and a lot of really good writers, like in terms of like not even just stylistically good, like writers who have something to say, And to me, that is like the most important thing is someone, when a writer has something to say. Um, are always people who have, started in one place, done a lot of travel, wandered all about, and then come back to that same place. And there's something
Really?
interesting about that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think JDO, J. David Osborne did that. Like I think he grew up in Oklahoma, then he lived in the Pacific Northwest and I think other places and stuff, and now is back in Oklahoma. I know a few guys in Australia like that, as well. So I think that's an interesting dynamic. There's something there. I don't know what it is, but there's something there.
Well, it kind of brings to mind that hero's journey little
Mm,
loop
mm.
where you're supposed to like leave home, get in over your head and meet some wise people, and then have some tough times, eventually kind of pull it together to come back home. And of course,
And do your
like,
best work at home.
yeah,
Yeah,
I guess so,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's how it's been for me. You're right
mm,
about that. I wonder if
yeah.
it may be a thing.
Mm. Maybe it's the experience that you get, when you go on that loop, and that's the boon you bring home. Like the
Right.
the talent.
Boom.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the word.
yeah. Boon is such a great word. I love saying boon.
I do too. I
But yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I did it again. I cut you off again,
No, no, no.
please.
Go ahead. I didn't have anything.
Well, I wanted to ask you guys about Australia. And in particular, we had mentioned film,
Mm, mm.
because I have a thing, and that maybe we can relate this to what we were just talking about, but how many people are in Australia? Like
About
prior
20,
to go ahead,
right, 27 million.
27 million.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
At the at
But
the at
like,
the moment, and
and
growing.
about
Hmm.
right. So, but if we say like 15, 20 years ago, was it half that?
Yeah, probably.
It was
Okay.
maybe like 18 or 20 or something.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
that was
Yeah.
the last time I remember someone telling me what the population was. It's about
Mm.
that.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what do you guys think about the idea that, or what's the explanation behind the the creative power and genius, I guess, behind Australian cinema? How is it that this country puts out some of the best, like classic, world-changing, but also, we talked about Breaker Morant. Like
Mm.
that's not maybe, Mad Max levels of cultural influence, but that's
Great
one of
film,
the
actually. Yeah.
that's one of the 10 best movies I've ever seen. I
Mm.
still think about that movie, and I wonder if there's something about this, relationship between home and leaving home and what is home. Because how does that movie made about stuff that happens, I think, in Rhodesia or South Africa,
Boer, yeah.
Boer War,
Yeah.
wind up to a kid in Oregon, probably in about 1982, I think, or maybe 84 or something. And I'm watching that with my dad, and that was one of the first movies where I feel like I woke up as I was watching it. And it was moving, and I could tell that my dad was just impressed. This is a great, great movie and that doesn't happen all the time. And as I go through it, like the history, there's quite a few,
Mm.
an inordinate number of fantastic Australian films. Off the top of your head, or maybe you guys had thought about that. What do you think that is?
Well, I think I would say that that's probably not the case lately. But
Yeah,
but
not anywhere though, really.
yeah, that's true.
That's true.
But like I think what was the last really good Australian film you can remember, Frester? Like
Last really good one.
the Nick Cave one, The Proposition, that was pretty good.
I, I can barely
Oh,
remember it, but
It's like
yeah,
an Australian Western, basically.
yeah.
Um, but
I mean, there's the movies like that get critically acclaimed, are like there's Snowtown and
oh yeah.
Knit Ram, those kind of movies, which I
Mm,
think I like them sort of like they have like an interesting kind of style to it, but they're also kind of very boring, and
mm.
I think they get a bit overhyped. But I guess they are good. But yeah, I don't know what
This,
I would say the last
this
really good one was.
I know what you mean, Andy, about like the 70s and 80s, because that was a real time in Australian cinema where it wasn't just like, oh, these are really good. These are like films that like stick to your rib sort of thing. Like
Mm,
they're
yeah.
like they last, they endure. Uh Breaker Morant's one of those, Mad Max, of course, and The Road Warrior as well. Oh, and I'll throw in Thunderdome too. Who cares? Like that's a great
yeah,
film.
Yeah.
But like and then there's other things like Picnic at Hanging Rock, which is an amazing film, so dreamy, and but I think that was largely due, and it pains me to say this because I'm so anti arts funding, but it's like it was largely due to the government just like giving like talented filmmakers heaps of money, not heaps of money, but like
enough.
budgets enough. Um, but then I think when that started, there was sort of like not as many bureaucratic strings. There wasn't as many like boxes that you had to tick and things like that because it was very, and if there were, like that was back in the day when Australian men didn't give a fuck and just didn't do the paperwork. So it was just like we don't
Right.
we don't have men like that anymore. At least not men who are making films. Um, so I think that was part of it. Like there was a kind of wildness to like the people who were making it, but also a very they had some money behind them as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. I can't I did study film, and I did study Australian film, but I've never like really thought about that question beyond they could just got money at this period of time. But I think it was because um, it's kind of a few governments were in the mid century. Australia was sort of trying to move away from the Commonwealth, the British, like, and trying to forge its own identity. So I think that was part of it. There was a lot of cultural kind of sort of what would we call them? Experiments, like to sort of forge the nation a little bit more, not not on the kind of British terms. So I think that's probably part of it. That like it was a concerted effort to do that. So yeah, and yeah, that is a great period of Wake in Fright as well. Amazing film. Like it's like probably the best Australian film, but
Yeah.
it is really terrifying at the same time. Yeah, and newer ones as well, even newer ones that didn't really get the kind of recognition that they deserve. The Two Hands, that's an amazing
Oh
film
yeah.
with Heath Ledger. That's and we do really good crime, I think, like
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
latter day. Have you seen? This isn't a movie, but it's a series called Mr. In Between. That's a great like series, crime series.
Haven't seen it.
It's you should watch it. It's really funny, and very, very Australian.
Mr. In Between. Have
Yeah.
you guys seen I think it's called Rover?
I've
Kind
heard
of
of
a
that, but I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the last one that was recommended to me that I think is all Australian. And it um who's the guy Pierce?
Mm,
You know, he's the big export now. A great actor. I love that guy.
mm.
That was a really good movie. And it was maybe in the past 10 years or so. Um that that's a depressing explanation. You must be right because what did they give you guys like a 30-year window to develop an identity and then begin to crush it?
Mm.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
that's not right.
Mm. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's I think actually it's sort of the I think I'm more optimistic that I think we're at a um that the country will continue to sort of forge an identity, and I'm hopeful that people who are making art and stuff outside of the institutions, because the institutions here are just like everywhere else, artistically moribund. They're like no one cares. Like the wider
Yeah.
public doesn't care. Like no one gives a shit. And so, but there are really exciting things happening outside of that. With people who go and do it themselves, like yourself, Andy. Like so, yeah. So like I don't know. I'm more optimistic about it, and I
Got an
think
answer
Good.
for a last good Australian film that I think I was probably from the 2000s, but I remember it's called The Last Train to Frio or something like that.
oh yeah.
And it was just like it was just this like guy on a train kind of thing, just being like scary psychopath, like just talking to these people. But it had like lots of like sort of like philosophical dialogue and stuff like that. But it was just kind of like that, like sometimes like like a dinner with Andre or something like that, where it's just like a conversation or something for a whole movie, but it's like just like enthralling. It's been a long
Mm,
time since I saw it, so maybe it doesn't hold up, but I remember that one being really good.
there you go.
Cool.
Well,
Thank you. I've got it written down. The Last Train to Frio or something like that. And I'll
there you
figure
go.
it out.
Yeah, I think it's like Fremantle. Is that in WA,
Yeah,
right?
they call it Frio though in
Yeah, so I
in
think
Western Australia. Yeah.
I think it had that Swedish actor in it though. I can't remember his name.
Skarsgård.
No, the guy. He's in like Fargo or something like that. I could be complete.
Yeah, that's Stellan Skarsgård, I think, isn't it? Is that him?
I don't think it's a Skarsgård. It's
Oh,
like he looks more like thuggish and like a criminal. I could
I
be
know that guy.
completely mistaken about who I'm talking about. I get actors' faces mixed up all the time. So just yeah, I don't know if that's correct at all.
but yeah, there are some great films still. Some good TV as well, like I said. But yeah,
Yeah. There's a
yeah.
lot of garbage, and I think that's the thing
Oh
is too,
yeah.
you get the filter, like where we see all of the like local horse shit.
Right.
Like my
Yeah.
dad will always be like, "Have you seen this show?" And you're like, he puts it on, you're like, "What is this dog shit?" Like, but yeah, so like there's like that sort of filter where you just like you get the good ones that make it through tend to be pretty good.
Mm. That's another thing that's interesting, going back to what we were saying before, is even in local contexts, things are so fragmented. Like, there are shows that are on here that I've never heard of, and they're like apparently people watch, and
The free to
you
air
know,
ones, like that
yeah,
are
yeah, the
still
free
on
to air
like
ones, but yeah, like also just streaming shows because it's so like no one watches the same five channels anymore, So like it's this weird fragmentation. There's no common culture anymore. So anyway, that's another like sort of repercussion of the internet, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
that's the same way here.
mm.
This idea that we used to be able to just mention, have you seen that show yet? Have you seen that movie yet? Or did you read that? I haven't heard that in 15 years,
Mm,
you know, where
mm.
where everyone, oh yeah, of course I saw it. What'd you think?
mm,
It
mm.
seems,
Like the X
but also
Files or something. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
or a movie, or I mean,
Mm,
novels has been a long, long time, I suppose, since there was a common culture, as you say.
mm,
That we got to work on that, or
mm,
or or uh or work on like knitting all of the little good cultures together, and then sort of,
mm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it
Oh,
seems like too if you try to suggest something too, like everyone's just like immediately like, oh yeah, yeah, well have you seen this? Like they're just like jumping on top. Like
yeah,
everyone wants to be the one that suggests the thing that everyone
yeah,
watches, and then you're like, well, they're not gonna watch my thing, so I'm not gonna watch their thing. Sorry, Matt,
It's true. It's true.
yeah. Sorry, Matt, I interrupted you for your
Well, I did want to say, like, in t terms of knitting all these cultures together, that's a good segue into like just you don't have to go into a great amount of detail, but in terms of like publicizing this book, like
Yeah.
I think you did it the right way in that you've clearly gone on heaps of podcasts, but there is a wrong way to do this, and I'm not quite sure what the parameters are, but like sometimes you can just I think you chose whose podcast you went on very well. Like, in terms of, I don't know if you still got more to do after this, but like, you clearly catered your appearances to podcasts that would be amenable to the themes and style of the book, right? Whereas I find that a lot of people, especially on the, DIY kind of writer guys, just will like spam everyone, like, and I get it because you want to sell books, right? Like, but I think there's something to be said for being very judicious with who you approach. And did you want to talk about that and like how you made these decisions? And because I think you went on a lot of podcasts that are very, podcasts we've been on and have been on ours and stuff like that, but also other ones that are sort of not necessarily connected to ours, but in a, you know, vague orbit. So yeah, what was the kind of principles there, if any?
Let me think if there was. There was. And what I found in doing this, and then I'll try and go, because if anyone listening can improve upon it or use it, I'm happy to give it away. What I found after, because I launched in, I guess, November, and then I got a massive bump from, let's call it like a huge influencer,
Mm,
who Daryl Cooper, he has the Martyr Made podcast. So that is an element of the success, I think, of Crowbar, that if anybody out there, if you can repeat that, do that. If there's an influencer out there who you can reach and on a real level, because marketing such that he just gave me, or any big influencer would give you, what I've gotten, and with Daryl, there's like um nothing like this. It's just simply him seeing this process that we've been talking about all this time, of the disintegration of our cultures, and the degradation of human being and our abilities to think and, be human, even getting laid at the bar. And he knows that. And I had sort of deduced that about him. And so if you can find somebody that is amenable to where you're at, that, unfortunately, it made 10x the difference, or maybe even 50x the difference. But being able to go onto, high quality, such as yours, well respected podcasts. It was also massive, like a massive difference. And to swing back to the point that I left sitting on the table, what I determined as I watched the numbers and fielded, because I'm just a guy, like I get two text messages a month, from my dad or whatever. I'm not a big, but then you launch a book and you're like, holy shit, I've got to manage this, like all of these texts and all this social stuff. And I am kind of an old guy. So it's a market change. You can't help but take part in it. And of course, I'm trying to sell books. I realized that the resonance of people talking about it or saying, "Well, who's this dude?" Or, "Yeah, it looks pretty good. I'll check it out." Or, "Oh, I read his first book. It's fantastic. Get his next one." Any type of this back and forth is siloed. Um, in a and to the extent that I was able to breach those silos and kind of move around, that was all just me hustling at midnight trying to find somebody. Like, does Brad Kelly, our mutual friend, know of a couple podcasts that I've overlooked? Well, it turns out he does, because he's been mining this purely literary thing for a long enough time that he knows. He's not just sending me a list of, yeah, here's top 50 book podcasts. He's saying, no, these guys are really really smart and really good readers, and send them an email. So I was able to not do that spamming bit at all. I tried a couple. There were a few podcasts that didn't get back to me. Um, but for the most part, everyone that I selected as a hopeful wound up saying, okay, yeah, there's enough overlap with what you're doing, Andy, and what we enjoy or what we're talking about, that it'll work. And I could add as well, for the guy who's thinking about going this road, I started that process, at least a month before the launch, maybe earlier. And I'm sure a pro would start that 6 months or a year out. But that made a big difference too, not having to scramble and schedule and feel like I was behind the curve. Yeah, the only thing that we need to do next time is somehow find more bridges between the various silos. There's something called post lefty, or like, and it's sort of a phrase for, maybe say, people in Portlandia who got tired of being caricatured, or realized, like, hey, this thing that I'm marching along with actually sucks, and they left the art behind.
Mm-mm.
There's a lot of those people. They don't have anything like an established, they think they're the counterculture, and then they're just kind of realizing, like, no, you marched for 10 years down this road with Apple and everybody else, and there was an extant kind of counterculture. When those people wake up um, to their situation, maybe we can build more bridges, because there's a lot of smart people there. They're not all just mindless hive. A lot of, many of them are, but I mean, how that develops is going to be, I think, a big piece of the next, 5 to 10 years for people such as ourselves. A few of the podcasts, I know I'm running on, so please interrupt me if I'm
No,
uh,
it's
if I'm
fascinating. I'm interested in it.
okay. But if I miss anything, let me know. There's a few where, maybe those podcasts are, what do you call them? They're kind of like a mixed bag, where I'm thinking of Jay Burden in particular. He's a young guy, very smart, very good, and he's going hard at like content. So he is able to, like, almost do a variety show. That's the term I
Mm.
was looking for, where he can go very deep into politics and he can go very deep into film or passively deep anyway, deep enough. Shows like that, I think, are really, really important because that's the closest thing to a kind of bridge that we have where
Mm.
you're starting to talk to guys who, or they're listening to you anyway and realizing, well, I haven't read fiction for like 7 or 8 years because everything at the bookstore is completely fake or completely geared towards some identity other than my own. And then he hears, well, wait, that actually sounds pretty good. And that's kind of the closest thing that we have to this. And when I say silos, I do think that, and this relates to Crowbar, of course, is that the algorithm and whatever purposes it's serving, like it's not serving that human need from the, if you will, maybe a little highfalutin, but the perspective of the heart or the perspective of the long-term investment that we have as people. It's just merely serving line go up right now, and percentages say that this guy never sells to these types of people. So those silos are difficult, really tough to get through via DM or a mutual or websites. Websites are almost like useless at this point.
Mm.
Some of them maybe, but yeah, and I have to say, I don't know what other people's sales numbers look like, but I've talked a little bit with a few people, and it seems as if that Crowbar launch, I'm as surprised as anybody else. I mean, I'm right. You read Crowbar. It's like very niche. It's really not written for a mass
Mhm.
audience, and it's not really catered to people who aren't going to that go for the ride. Um, I think it's pretty successful. I blown away, honestly, by how many books were sold and how much money was made in a short amount of time, way beyond my wildest expectations. And
Mm.
so there's some suggestion it may not be over yet, that we may get a couple more bumps or maybe even another huge bump. I hope. I really am trying to sell the film rights,
Mm.
because I think that's the next step. The markets of how to do that are very, very new. They're not like those same pathways that got Breaker Morant to me.
Mm.
But maybe it's our version of something like that, where
Yeah.
there's guys with balls out there and there's a little bit of money and maybe something like Passion of the Christ is a good story. Maybe not everyone's cup of tea as a film, but as a production, an object of art, like that thing nobody in Hollywood would touch it, And again, a like heroic Australian behind the. I mean,
Mm.
I didn't even make that connection until this moment. That's one of the most successful films critically and financially of all time, and it really proved, I think, to a lot of people that whatever the content is, these silos, I think that the silos really function in some way to control the money and to control the flow. And maybe it's just information or data at this point, but it's probably mostly money.
Mm.
They want, the middlemen want a big slice of whatever happens. And so that's all shut up now, but there's potential for guys out there, writers, filmmakers, musicians even, that if you keep scrambling, we may find a way kind of under the door. Because I know of a lot of people working on these similar ideas and projects, and how do we sort of defeat the algorithmic silo? It's a serious, serious
Mm.
and thing. It's a real, real problem.
Yeah. But I don't know, like I think for your book, like this your book is obviously just one corner, one guy's project, but I think
Yeah.
you went about it the right way. I've got so many examples, I because I'm polite, I will not name them, but
I know
like
who you're thinking
uh,
of.
who like, yeah, who just, oh God, just just were very needy and grabby, like with everyone, and it
Well,
was
with
just
that
like,
guy you're talking about, like,
mm,
what I did appreciate at the start of his media tour was like it did seem like a book that everyone was getting behind, and it was like, hey, cool, we're all gonna have the same book we read that we can all
mm,
reference, sort of thing. Like that was for me exciting about that. Like, and I was like,
mm.
hey, and then it just all sort of fizzled out. It didn't turn out to be anything, but
Yeah, because the
like
book wasn't good.
it was fun. But yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't. It's not
Oh, I
like
thought you gave it a bad review. Maybe we're talking about
no.
different things.
Yeah, no, we're talking about the same book. I didn't give it a bad review.
Oh,
Another
no, I
guy in
did.
my
No, I
Noah
did. Yeah,
did, but
yeah,
I didn't say it was like Dostoevsky or anything. I just said
yeah.
it was like, yeah, it was fun to read.
Mm,
Um,
okay. But yeah, so like, yeah, there is something. Yeah, and the silo thing isn't a real issue. But it's interesting that podcasts are like the kind of the podcasting world is like this sort of um meeting place for all this stuff to happen. That's very exciting, I think. Because I don't know why, but like podcast audiences buy books, like they just do. Every time someone comes on our show, it's like, oh, I got like this big spike in sales, and I'm like, oh, okay. We don't have anything like a Joe Rogan audience or any, but like apparently, people are motivated to purchase books. So when they listen to literary podcasts, which now that I say that out loud, that does kind of make sense. But
yeah,
but yeah, so it is interesting this like whole podcasting scene being this facilitator for all this stuff, which is cool.
It's super cool. Yeah, and
Mm,
they're actually, like I said, I love listening to this podcast. I love listening to Brad Kelly's podcast. So maybe that's actually the trick. Now that I
mm,
I back engineer it and you help me,
mm,
I think what ultimately I didn't go on anybody's podcast that I didn't feel like would be a pretty fun, okay time.
mm,
You know,
mm,
like I'm not calling up. I mean, I guess I would go on Oprah or something like that just for the money,
mm,
but nothing like that ever even occurred to me. And
mm,
maybe I wasn't as I should have said that up front. Like that's kind of how I am though after being kicked in the teeth now for 25 years. I'm not and I don't have enough time to really be stupid about this stuff. So
mm,
absolutely write the best book that you possibly can. And then write another one that's even better. Keep going. And yeah, if there's I haven't talked to anyone that I would not go back and talk with again tomorrow that
mm,
I didn't feel comfortable with, that I thought in any way was either soulless or stupid or mean-spirited or anything else that would be off-putting. And I did a little homework and checked everyone's, material before, or I already knew about them.
mm, mm. Yeah,
That's maybe,
that's yeah, the best guests are sort of like kind of have
yeah.
listened to the show at least, because
mm,
then you
Yeah.
can just but like I mean that's obviously that's a little bit different with like the big celebrity guests that you get sometimes. Like I don't think David Mamet has listened to our show, but that's cool. I don't care.
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
yeah, he can come on anytime. I think Bruce Wagner did though, like from what I could
really,
tell with our correspondences. Yeah. So that's cool. Um, but yeah,
yeah,
you never know who's listening either. That's the other thing that podcasting people don't realize about podcasting. Like, once you get on Patreon, you can sometimes see who's listening, and you're like, oh, like we don't have any big celebrities, but like friends of ours who podcast do as well, who subscribe to their podcasts. So people in media and Hollywood and stuff like that. So like big names. So yeah, you never know who's listening either. So that's why podcasts are good promotional tools. So if you're out there and you're a Hollywood guy and you want to produce Andy's book, get in contact, I guess.
Yeah, and Matt gets a cut, and the other Matt gets a cut, and that's
Oh
how these
yeah,
things work.
it'll be in US dollars too. That'll be a nice juicy exchange rate for me. All right. Like anything else to say from you, Fresta, or
um, no, nothing really. I thought the book was great. Yeah, appreciate that you're really like pioneering like a style kind of thing. Like it's actually an interesting piece of work. But yeah, I didn't get much sleep last night, so my brain is fried. So I haven't gotten
You're
anything
doing
more into.
fine, man.
Oh,
Mm.
thanks.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
and Andy, anything else you'd like to say or?
No, other than um, thank you very much. I do love your podcast. I think you guys should keep going. I think you should take that Oprah position of power and influence. And if some big wig is listening, I'm just a dude, and those are my thoughts, and they're probably shared, far and wide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we're both named Matt, so instead of the big O, it can be a big M, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and Andy, where can people find you and your book? So, would you prefer them to buy it from Amazon or where should they go?
Yeah, the only spot is Amazon. I will say that Bezos has to take his cut, which everyone sucks. I get messages all the time saying, I hate this guy, I don't want to give him his cut. But and I believe me, I'm with you. But I have looked in, I've been offered publishing deals since King of Dogs, and every time that I looked at um the numbers, you may be surprised that Bezos's deal is not only a little bit better, it's four times as good sometimes. It's really not
Mm,
so bad.
mm,
So I'm not defending him. I'm just saying, hold your nose if and purchase from him. That's where it's all happening right now. And then if you want to find me on X, that's the main social place. There's a link tree there. My handle is Golden Goat Guild, and in that link tree, there's some reviews, a direct link to Amazon if you want to go that way. But I think that's it.
amazing, amazing. So, do you schizo post on X? I'm not on X very much anymore, so like I don't
I have schizo posted so much in my life that I wound up writing a novel about it.
know.
I do. I think that X, I love X, and I have to I have to control my time. But I'm a little fearful that well, I don't know. Maybe like there is cause to be optimistic. I hope
Mm,
that, I heard you do that once or twice where it's like you're balancing your pessimism or you're with some definite light. And I
mm,
sense that too.
mm,
So when I say maybe X is not as good as it once was, it's still pretty good. It's
mm.
still okay. Um, but in terms of schizo posting, yeah, I've almost retired. I just kind of get around and I make a joke if I can, or
Yeah,
I
yeah.
try to find other cool people to follow, and
Hmm.
and that's about it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he retired from schizo posting. Oh,
Yeah.
no, that's fine. I was just wondering. So yeah, follow Andy on X and buy his wonderful book. Yeah, and thank you for coming on and open invitation if you ever want to come on again. We can talk about anything. Like even if you don't have a book, we can chat about some other book if you want.
I
Maybe
would love to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, yeah, thanks very much for joining us, and I'll see you guys later, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you.
Catch you later.
Thank you. See ya.
September 30th, 1969. At 17,200 hours, we're on patrol just down below the DMC. We got plastic explosives and M1s, a couple of puffs to back us up in case we get into a firefight. The villagers are all friendly. They haven't seen Charlie, but they're in there. I saw Smith get blown up the other day. A piece of his brain landed on my boot. He was always a sloppy individual. There's two types of people who make it through this war. The ones who break down, and the ones who survive. I mean, just how much death Suddenly there's a crackling of the rifle shots. I notice I've taken a chunk of metal in the leg. I bust open 2 units of 100cc morphine. Of course I can't feel it, but I'm snorting coke all day. I see him in my sights. Cherokee Indian.